Hi, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of AIHR Live. My name is Nelly Valinden. I am your host today, and I hope that everyone is doing well. With me, as you can see, is Ozlem Sarioglu. Hi, Ozlem.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very fine, thank you. How about you?
I'm good too. I'm very glad that we made it to this episode.
Yeah, me too, definitely.
Before we get started, I would like to ask you to don't hesitate to say hi in the comments on LinkedIn and let us know where you are tuning in from, because we are very curious to know who you are and where you're watching this episode from. For today, what we had in mind is that for the next 20 minutes or so, Ozlem and we will be talking about learning agility and coaching. We'll discuss how HR can help to build learning agility across an organization and what role coaching can play with that. And then, of course, by the end of the episode, we'll have about 10 minutes where we will try and answer as many of your questions as possible. So that should be very interesting. Now, let me give Ozlem a proper introduction. So, Ozlem, who you might recognize from a previous episode that we did with her a couple of weeks ago, is the co-founder and managing partner of Sparkus. And Sparkus is a platform that combines AI-assisted coaching with human intervention, and it helps organizations to scale coaching. Now, Ozlem has a lot of experience with coaching, over 1,500 hours, and she's also written a book, of which I'll ask her to tell us the title herself, Ozlem.
Yeah, it is called World Voices in a Polarized World, because we're living in this really very polarized area. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Now, I think that is everything from my end, so we can get started. Before we do that, though, I think it is good that we look at the term learning agility first, just to give you a quick reminder. What do we mean by learning agility? Now, learning agility is, put simply, the ability to unlearn, learn, and relearn. And I recently saw in an article that it was actually very well described, I thought. It was described as, instead of having a hammer and looking at every problem as a nail, you have an entire toolbox at your disposal, which means that, of course, you can look at a problem in very different ways and use various tools to solve it. And I thought that was a good way to describe a learning agility. Now, on that note, I'm going to stop the talking on my end, and I'm going to go to you, Ozlem, with our very first question. And that is, how are learning agility and coaching relate to each other? Can you explain that to us?
Sure, thank you. So I would add one more thing to the definition, the general definition. Like you said, learning agility is generally defined as the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. But I would say what actually makes it possible is the willingness also to learn,
Yes.
relearn, and unlearn. So it's not only just the skill set we're talking about, but we're also talking about people's willingness to try it out, to do it. So when we look at the key dimensions of learning agility, one of the key dimensions is, for instance, self-awareness, for people to be aware of their strengths, what they need to learn, etc. And that willingness, the other dimension is the willingness to not know, to not to be like, I know it all kind of a person. So when we look at that materials, they're also there very much in the coaching. People come into the coaching sessions without knowing something, and they try to find their way out in that coaching session. And it's also about self-awareness, self-reflection. So when you look at it in that perspective, coaching and learning agility are very much related to each other, not only in terms of to develop the learning skills, to develop new skills, but also to have that kind of a mindset to learn things, that having that willingness to even to unlearn things, which is even harder to, learn something.
Definitely, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I have a really good example of this. I think for people who have perhaps been using a Samsung phone for years, and you get used to using that Samsung phone, and then if you decide to change to an iPhone, for instance, you have to unlearn everything that you've been doing on that Samsung, and then you have to learn. And that's a really simple example, but yeah, sometimes unlearning things can be very hard.
That's generally what stands in the way of change management, as you know. Like people say, like, oh, but we've been doing this all like this so far. And that's in front of all the innovation and everything. So yeah, exactly the examples you're given.
Yeah. And while you were talking, Ozlem, I was wondering if there is perhaps something else that is important as well. And I would like to call it perhaps the possibility to fail, and the fact that it's okay to make a mistake and to try again. Is that something that okay?
Yeah, that's definitely that. Yeah, I would also say, like, that's at the core of to understand that what brought me here may not brought me there. Like new life requires me to try something new, the ability, the willingness to fail. And generally in the corporate life, we know that people generally are very much focused on success stories, for instance. They want to, in order to create success stories, they keep on repeating the things they used to do. But what we basically need in terms of learning something new, and also in terms of innovation, that we should have that willingness to risk things a little bit. Not maybe risk things altogether, but to take calculatable risks and being okay with failing from time to time. So that's very much linked to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you know, I always like to recap answers if possible, and if I was able to follow it, of course. So I think then if we see how learning agility and coaching are related, we've got several elements. We've got the element, of course, of the willingness, first of all. We have the self-awareness. And then we have perhaps indeed the possibility to make a mistake and learn from that as well.
Yeah,
okay, fantastic. Thank you. Then we go to our next question. And so, Ozlem, when we were preparing this, we were talking about this. There is something that learning agility and coaching have in common, something else that they have in common. And that is that both of them, they tend to be considered as a tool rather than a mindset.
Yeah.
Can you explain this to us?
Definitely. Yeah. Actually, I wrote a screen for you to share to describe how it works. Thank you for bringing that. When we're talking about the tools, one thing about the learning agility is, as we said, like when we just consider it as the ability, then we just consider it as a tool. Then we, focus on how to develop skills, etc. But then we skip the piece of like making it a mindset, a general idea. And very similar to coaching. When we're considering coaching and learning, most of the people on the who are watching us would probably recognize this formula to learn things: 70, 20, 10. And the 70% is the experience, 20% is social learning, which also includes coaching, and 10 is the trainings, the regular trainings that we have. So if you just can, maybe I can also share it, make the changes over here.
Yeah.
So if you just, it appears, okay, good. So when we look at coaching as a tool, we just consider it only as a part of that 20. So we just say like, so I have this person to develop, so I'm going to hire a coach, or I'm going to, very similar areas of like mentoring and peer learning. So we can just say like, I'm going to hire this person, and coaching is going to help them to develop, basically. So when we just look at it in a with the perspective of a tool, then the coaching is just the 20%. But we just know that for the social learning to really happen, the individual who's going through the coaching process first needs a level of preparation. So they need to be aware of what they really need in this process. So that is required on one level. The other thing is they need to be really accountable. They need to not just, come into the session, talk, and then go out and do nothing. They need to really take action on their learning. So that's one level. It requires a level of, as I said, preparation and accountability. And if you look at the other areas of learning, they're also very much related to coaching. The first area is the typical trainings that we always, when we first talk about learning and development efforts, we're very much focusing on that piece. It's about, the courses, workshops, e-learning. But for that information gathered from an outside to really turn into a real learning, first it requires purpose. And I'm going to give one example from myself, actually. When I was in high school, I was studying German, and I just studied it for like just a semester, and I just couldn't really learn it. So I basically, if you look at it from a learning perspective, I was not a good student. But now that I'm living in Amsterdam, I'm learning a very similar language, which is Dutch, and I really love it. I enjoy it a lot. I try to, watch series in Dutch, etc., because I have the purpose, because I'm living here. I need to learn it. So for that training to really happen, people need to be aware of their purpose. Why am I learning this? And which is very much related, again, to coaching, because in coaching sessions, we start with the purpose, like where are you really heading to? So that makes it easier for people to understand why they're learning something. And the other thing is obviously the growth mindset, not having that fixed mindset, as we discussed, of saying like, okay, I have finished everything, I just done my part, I really studied a lot and I cannot change. No, it requires for people to really have that willingness to grow, really. So have that kind of willingness, as you said, to risk things, to make failures and stuff. So we need to have that kind of growth mindset for the trainings to really turn into learning. And if you're going into the 70%, which is the on-the-job experience-based learning, that also requires purpose, because the experience I'm trying to get has to be somehow linked to my purpose. Otherwise, it's just an experience. And I don't really feel the connection. I don't feel engaged with the experience. But I also need a reflection, because experience, when we're talking about experience, it's happening all the time in all my connections, in everything. Maybe we can share it with the audience that we prepared for this session 2 weeks ago. Then we had a technical issue, and that basically didn't happen.
We did.
Exactly. And we learned from that experience. We could have gone and said like, oh, what a pity. But we basically said like, okay, so what do we do with this experience now? How do we use it for this session? So if we just use every little details of those kind of experiences as a part of the learning process, as we can take them as kind of a reflecting on them. Actually, there are tons of experiences that we can learn from. So when I'm going back to coaching, coaching is not only that session you have one-on-one with a coach. It actually involves having some level of self-reflection, slowing down, looking at yourself from a distance, learning from your experiences, reflecting on your experiences, and also having that mindset that, oh, I actually, I figured out so much about myself. I have this self-awareness. Then what am I going to do with that, really? So all that levels are very much embedded into coaching, which is very much linked to, as I said, the learning agility, because it's just kind of like a facilitator of learning agility, I would say.
Yes. So I think that is very well explained, Ozlem. Thank you for that. Basically, what you're saying is that if you're only thinking about coaching and learning agility as a tool, then you are only scratching the surface, basically, of both of these. And that's what you see very well reflected here, I think, in this image. So thank you very much. I'm going to remove that beautiful image. And then, so what I'd like to do now is let's look at inside an organization, and let's look at the individuals in the organization. What can they do to build their own learning agility?
Very good question. One is, as we already said, that willingness to try something new. It could be basically like taking on a new opportunity, a new job, a new project, or maybe just looking at the things that I used to do with a different perspective and saying like, okay, so let's try this out as well. Like we never tried this, but let's see. Not having that feeling of like, what if we try something and it fails? But just being more open to that. So that's obviously one level. But then going back to the purpose idea again, and I would say people need to know why they're doing what. So for that, only I can know where I'm heading in life. Only I can know my personal vision, which also encompasses the professional vision that I have. Generally, what I observe professionals, they don't spend the time to sit down and think about where am I heading in life. They're somehow skipping. I have seen, many coaching clients who said like, oh, they offered me this job and it looks like I'm going to get some expertise on this level and that. And when I check what their vision is, it basically has nothing to do with that expertise. But if people are just skipping that part, like where am I heading, and just focusing on an area which is basically irrelevant to what they want in life in general. So for that vision building, we can use a few things. One is obviously they can work with a coach. They can do some journaling, writing things down, expressing what I already know over here into words, either written or in verbal, really helps them to define where they're heading. We have a digital coaching platform, obviously, and we give them some exercises like picking and choosing from photos, listening to audio files. So there could be some kind of exercises they can do as well. But there are lots of tools to define the vision. But I would say first define where you're heading so that you would then figure out, what needs to develop. And then, of course, that comes back to, then I need to know where I am right now. So one level is obviously being aware of your strengths. You can do a self-assessment, kind of an assessment or something like that. But it's also very much related to self-awareness. Again, going through processes and saying like, oh, I've done that part good. So I can use this, what I've done over there, I can maybe apply it to another area. Or, oh, I'm really having difficulty doing that. Maybe I need to change something. So having that self-reflection and again is very crucial, and obviously getting feedback. So most of the time we're thinking feedback as kind of a criticism, and we just take our we armors against it. But it basically is for me to develop, even though it was given horribly. If there is some level of truth in it, just stopping arguing with the people's way of approaching, but really looking into the core of what the feedback I receive. They're all very important for me to learn where I am. And then once I have the two pillars, one is my vision, where I'm heading, and then the other is where I am right now, then I can start figuring out how to fill that gap. And then it comes down to like, what do I need to learn? What do I need to unlearn? And then the training will come at the end. So, all the parts so far I talked about are, if you're talking about the 70-20-10, are basically the 90%. And then I can use all those tools to develop myself, but I can also then go to trainings, which are obviously not necessarily, the trainings organized by my organization. It can be just listening to like this live session, listening to something. So there are lots of information out there going to YouTube, going to, I don't know, Coursera type of trainings and e-learnings. But it's really the very last bit most of the time, where people generally think in terms the other way around. They first start with the trainings, but they don't really make sense unless you do all the other background anyway. So that would be the core, I would say, for the individuals.
Yeah, so it really starts with us doing our homework, and more specifically, that means that we should really get to know ourselves better. Probably we need to know ourselves, our strengths, and what we aspire to. Just to recap once again. Yeah. Okay, then now we get to HR, because I can see how HR can play a role in this. But I'd really like your opinion on that, of course, and your expertise. So how can HR help to build learning agility across the organization?
Great question. Because most of the time, there is a clash between the HR and the individuals. Individuals just look to the HR to give them trainings. And I'm going back to individuals and saying trainings are the last bit. First, you need to do your homework. But then the HR also is, expecting people to take that responsibility automatically. And I would say it doesn't happen automatically like that. They need to give them the road, the framework to really develop these. So one thing is obviously going back to the failure story. It's maybe even not only HR's role, but leaders in the organization in general, is to make it a safe environment where it's okay to fail. Yes. So not really punishing people for their failures, but really saying like it's okay to fail from time to time, and not only share the success stories, but also create a space for the failure stories. We have that culture a lot in the startup world. Like there is this idea of like try fast, fail fast, learn fast. Yeah. But in the corporate world, most of the time it's not there. Most of the time it's really like, okay, so somebody comes out and brings their success story. So maybe HR can give those kind of spaces to say like, what was the failure? What did you learn? Just having those kind of conversations in the organization would start something new. So that's one thing. Obviously, there are the trainings and the tools to develop. Providing people with the LMS, with the resources. That's obviously there. Maybe not being the people to develop those resources, because as we discussed, there are lots of information out there. But being more like the curator of all those information for the people. And I would then go back to coaching, obviously, and I would say like coach as many people as possible. So I know that it's not easy to scale. We can discuss about that, like how do we do that later. But the people, as I said, need to define their vision. And if you don't have them do it, they generally don't make the connection. They basically don't spend the time because they're really already busy with doing other things. So, and this is also for them to have that coaching mindset, have that mindset of like, what did I learn from this? What do I more need to develop? So having that kind of a non-judgmental area where people are going through coaching, learning the coaching mindset, learning the growth mindset is very crucial. So, when I'm saying coach as many people as possible, one level could be receiving coaching from professional coaches, the other could be from mentors, involving a digital coaching platform, or it can also be training leaders, training managers to be better coaches. But I'm also giving a lot of trainings, not only to, let's say, the managers, but also to employees who are, just running a project, but they also need, that mindset and that skill set of coaching. So looking at the coaching on a broader perspective is a place to start, and start, giving people the tools to question things personally and on the business level, and creating all those, as I said, the frameworks for people to really look into all the levels of the 70, 20, 10.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to our audience 1 second. Thank you very much, because I can see that the first questions are coming in.
Okay,
very,
great.
very happy to see that. I have one more question for Ozlem, and then we will go to your questions. So in the meantime, if there's anything you'd like to know about coaching or learning agility or anything else related to today's topic, please don't hesitate and share your questions in the comments. Now, Ozlem, of course, there was a moment that we were going to talk about tech as well, a little bit, given your background. So we've seen how HR can use coaching to build learning agility a little bit already. How can tech play a role in that?
Yeah, that's a good question, really, because when we're talking about coaching, as I said, most of the time, when I say like coach as many people as possible, I can think about the buts in the minds of the HR people, because we don't have, enough budgets to bring it to everyone in the organization. We don't have enough time to bring it to everyone in the organization. And since it is a black box, because there is the confidentiality of coaching, obviously it is very difficult to make the ROI out of it. And so HR is a little bit shying away from putting even more money into it. So that's totally understandable. So the technology comes into play on that level, where it's easier to turn a very, I would say, an intangible process into a tangible process. And when we think about, we can think about having a coaching culture, to establish a coaching culture through technology, which, I mean, we discussed already in the past, so people can really go back and watch our previous video. But I want to talk more about how to use technology in order to scale coaching to more people. Not only the top management or some selected people, but everyone in the organization, bringing it down to the organization. So my experience, if I'm allowed to talk a little bit about what we're doing in my company, is to bring a technology in terms of digital coaching exercises, where people go through, for instance, their vision. As I said, can I share a few slides for people to have a kind of a view of how it might look like?
Yes, you can.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes. Can I add it?
Sure.
All right. So here's a slide.
Okay. Does it appear the platform page? Yes, I guess so. So, so people can go through their own exercises on a platform and do some, for instance, if you're talking about a vision board self-assessment, development can happen online. And for instance, in terms of the vision, we can just provide them with some photos. They can select and choose from that, do that journal writing online. So it is a place, it could be a place where people really do the self-reflection by themselves without even having a coach by themselves. So then we can, turn back and reflect what they've written over there. And then we can just make them reread what they've written. So the technology can help them to really first to self-reflect, but also to have a thought process step by step. Most of the time, of course, as human beings, all our thoughts are just, running around in our minds. So we just need a navigation tool. So I would say the technology can be the individual's navigation tool to find their way around. How we're basically gathering all these information, all the things they've done on the platform, is they can select and choose. It is still confidential. So that's very important to note. Otherwise, people won't share their experience. But it's on that level, it is confidential, and they write things down all by themselves, sitting in front of a computer without the social judgment concern. And then they can select and choose what to share with a coach. And then the coach comes into play. So I'm going to go back to Yeah, you can close the screen if you like. So what we're basically doing is the technology can facilitate the process. What we're doing is blending technology with the human interaction. So what happens is once they're ready, they have the preparation, they can come together with a coach, have a discussion with the coach based on the work they've already done. So it would make the coaching sessions much more effective, much more impactful, even in the very first session.
Yeah.
So it is easier to bring it down to less sessions per person, and so you can scale it to the masses. So there are lots of different ways of thinking about how to use technology in that sense.
Yeah, and I think this shows as well how the technology can help in nudging people towards doing their homework before they start talking with an actual human being that is a coach. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And what's also possible is, like, if you're saying, like, I'm going to take this action, you can set a date to it. It can appear on your calendar, for instance.
Yeah.
Those kind of nudges are possible when you use the technology, definitely.
Yeah, I think that is a really good example. And that also is a really good moment for us now, Ozlem, to get to our audience questions. I'm going to dive straight in with the first one. And the first one is coming from Abdulaziz Abubakar. And the question is, how do you unlearn?
Wonderful question.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, it is one of the hardest things to do. Let's really underline it once again. So what I learned on one area is just part of the learning as well, is interfering with my knowledge now. So, for instance, again, going back to my language lesson, I can say that I was studying on Duolingo. I was doing French first, and then I switched to Dutch when I came here. So the moment I saw that what used to be je in French is now je in Dutch, and it was one means you and the other means I, and I was like, oh my God. So it was like so the first thing is being aware that it is very difficult to unlearn what you already learned. So first, we need to willingness. Otherwise, we can just say, like, oh, this is impossible. So we first need to have that willingness to say, okay, I'm going to learn this again. So how do we unlearn? Most of the time by learning something new, by putting something either on top of it or next to it, let's say. So it has to be like expanding my horizon in terms of, like, okay, so I know this bit, but I'm going to bring that bit also next to it. But what I experience a lot with people is there is the fear that if I basically unlearn this, that this will totally melt away and this will disappear. No, what you've learned in the past is still an experience, and it is very much enriching to know. I mean, for instance, going back to the language issue, we can say, like, it's really very rich to learn many languages because you know many cultures. So if you look at, learning from that perspective, this doesn't melt away. What you're unlearning doesn't melt away. You're just adding something on top of it or just next to it. And that synergy between what you used to learn and what you're learning now is actually bringing things to a new level. So if you just have that feeling of, like, oh, so it is okay that I learned this. So going back to school, being okay to make mistakes, being okay to, go to do our field work, do our homework, and just enjoy being a student again. Then it is easier to unlearn and relearn.
Yeah, fantastic answer. Thank you, Ozlem. Okay, we are going on with our second question. All right, so this is a question coming from Daras Shah. And the question is, how can you help the coachee envision the entire learning journey?
Yeah. In my experience, I would go back to the platform, obviously, but what we are doing basically is giving them exercises for all the steps that I already said. So it's important for people to get a navigation tool. That's the main thing I would say. So for them to really have an understanding, a kind of maybe a set of exercises, define where they're heading, like any navigation tool would do, and then give them a tool set to define where they are right now. It could be, as I said, like the assessments, feedbacks, or just self-evaluation. So defining that, and then giving them the tools to envision what's really missing in between, what really needs to happen, what really needs to develop, giving that bit. And also maybe linking that, that's also something we do a lot on the platform, is linking it with the LMS system of the organization, for instance. When people say like, I'm going to develop, let's say, something about time management, then showing them automatically over there, like these are the resources you can go to. Those would just, hold the person from their hand and walk them slowly towards their goals. And also, it's, I think, very important. Most people don't know how to turn their development goals into small action steps. Most of the time, it's just like this big development goal that I need to develop, but I don't really know what little steps I can take to get there. So maybe helping them understand what an action is very important. When I'm giving trainings, for instance, based on the platform, what I hear again and again, like I wrote down an action thinking that it was an action. Then the platform asked me to add a date to it. And I was like, oh, so this is not an action, because it was just a wishful thinking that I would be more aware of it or something like that. And then turning into like, okay, what will I exactly do? When they have to put it down there, then they learn what an action really means and what development, and how the development really occurs.
Yes, thank you. Because so the answer is a bit more like tool focused, I think, because I saw that there was, which is great, which is, I think, a really good approach. I saw that the follow-up question, which I think you'll be able to answer quickly then, is should this be an exercise for introspection, or should we focus on being good storytellers when it comes to envisioning this entire learning journey?
I would say first the introspection, but then also, I mean, it's not only the storytelling. It's not like, how do I sell this? It's really about first the introspection, first the learning, and then of course I might need to be a good storyteller, because during the storytelling I put down my experience into little components. Then I understand what really happened in that storytelling, and then it just multiplies, because since I'm sharing my experience, first I receive maybe mentoring out of my experience, so it turns into social learning, but it also helps the other people to learn also because of my experience. So the storytelling, I would say, would come just after, very much linked, but after.
Okay, thank you. We are going to a question from Artemis Sequeira, and the question is, do you have any tips on how to encourage employees to take time to reflect and write down their development objectives? I think that's a great question.
Yeah. Based on my experience, since we're giving, as I said, a tool for them to do that, we just start with the notion that they won't do it. So they are busy people, they won't do it. That's we're just leaving aside the wishful thinking that they will do it. So the first thing to start is like, they are busy, they won't prioritize themselves. So the question is, how do we make them prioritize? Maybe giving them enough time to do it. For instance, the platform I showed you is just like, can be completed in 2 sessions in 2 hours, but we give people like a month to complete it. So a very realistic deadline is the thing, but still giving them a deadline is very important. Otherwise, it never becomes a priority. Otherwise, it's just like, yeah, one day I'm going to do that. So really setting the time for it, giving it enough time and just setting a time, and then going back to well-designed reminders. And scenario-based reminders as well. So that's exactly what we're doing. Because otherwise, it's like I just send reminders and they're just spam. People just keep on ignoring it. But if those who already completed don't need to receive it, those who are really doing well don't need to receive it, or maybe receive something in a different way. But turning it not into spams, but really being there for the people and just giving the message that this is not for just some kind of a bureaucratic thing that the HR is asking for, but it's really for the personal development of the person, that it's really for that person to do. So changing all our mindset, rather than saying like, this is a bureaucratic thing you have to complete, but rather saying like, this is for you. We are doing this for you, would change the narrative, I would say.
Yes, and I think perhaps, Ozlem, also helping them manage their workload, because let's be honest, if they're super busy at trying to get their work done and they don't know where do they have to find the time, then of course this can feel like a chore. It can feel like something that they have to try and fit in. So perhaps in that case, it's important to try and prioritize their workload with them and see where you can together find space to spend time on this.
Exactly. Time is really important. Thank you for bringing that one, because sometimes we expect them to do things when they're at their, high season. It could be, there are probably some periods where people are going into low season. So at the end of the year, we are expecting them to finish the budgets, make the goals, and by the way, complete the performance evaluation. So it's like a lot of things, and make your this and that. So this program comes over there. So if you just be more realistic about people's timelines and give those kind of initiatives, trigger those initiatives in the little bit like a lower season, let's say. Of course, there is always the high season, but there are sometimes some more flexible times. So if we, as the HR, if we just have that awareness in mind, then it would ease things really.
Yes, definitely. I have one last question before we really have to wrap up, Ozlem. And I'm not sure if you can give us a short answer, but I think it's a good question. The question is, how do you turn an organization into a learning organization? Now, I do think that part of this answer can be found in our previous episodes, for which we will share the link to the video in the comments below so you can watch it. But perhaps you can still say something about it, Ozlem.
Yes, that's a great question and very difficult to answer in a short time. But I would say changing the whole leadership mindset is not on the top level, but if we just have the idea that it is no longer like we give the strategies, you go down there and apply it, but just turning it into an inclusive organization, just by inviting people at all levels to give contribution, then it would be from bottom to up. And that would start by once people make contribution, they are much more willing to take responsibility and much more willing to engage with the results, with the unlearnings, and bring you the questions of like, okay, so this didn't work on our level, So if we just start by listening to people at all levels, that will, I think, start learning organization. But it's a very deep subject. As Neely said, you can all go to the previous conversation we had. We had, I think, almost an hour discuss about that.
Yes, about coaching culture. So yes, so
inclusion and listening, I would say.
Exactly. But please do watch our previous episode indeed, where we talk extensively about coaching culture and building a coaching culture. I think that will help you definitely with your answer, because we unfortunately reached the end of our time together again, Ozlem. So just like last time, I enjoyed it very much.
Me too.
Thank you very much for joining us again.
Yeah, time flies with you. and the order, great questions once again.
Yes, great questions once again as well. So thank you very much for that. Ozlem, okay, I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thank you once again, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Now, from me to you, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of AIHR Live. If you enjoyed the topics that Ozlem and I were talking about, you can take a look at our Learning and Development Certificate program that is available as a standalone program or as part of our All You Can Learn license. And our All You Can Learn license is actually available currently with a 20% discount. And there you can have access to all our programs with topics such as learning and development, of course, talent acquisition, digital HR transformation, HR metrics and reporting, and many other super interesting topics. So go to AIHR.com to check them out and get your 20% discount if you enroll before today midnight. Now, thank you once again. I hope to see you soon for our next episode of AIHR Live. And until then, stay safe. Bye.